Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guildhouse. This is a weekly podcast in which I, your host, Matthew Whitby, sit down with people all across the tabletop, RPG, and surrounding space. And this week, I'm delighted to be joined by Carlos Cisco. Hello.
Good morning.
Yeah, good.
I am. Well, I know we went through this, but that's fine.
No, oh no, we're pulling back the curtain. This is not the first time we've ever spoken. I must admit that's one of my highlights of this podcast. Is there's been a few times where I've ended it with going, "Well, enjoy the rest of your day," and they're like, "You too," and I'm like, "I'm going to bed right now." That's the remainder of my day. But no, how are you doing? How are you feeling?
Good. Just been busy with a lot of things I can't talk about, but many things I can.
Nice.
But I'm generally an early riser, so it's cool to actually get to talk about this stuff because I haven't really gotten much chance to do that yet.
Nice. Well, you know what? Let's not waste any time then. Let's talk about the stuff we can talk about.
All right.
I think like a podcast of things we can't talk about may not be as engaging. But no, for the people listening then, in case for whatever reason they haven't heard about some of the amazing stuff you've been doing, what have you been making?
So a couple. It's weird. It feels like a long time ago because I started just before the pandemic, and then time got real elastic there for a while. But I guess I started writing in the end of 2019, and it sort of goes back a little bit before that. So my first job or field of work is not game design. This is like something I sort of stumbled into as kind of a lark, and then found I don't know, maybe was okay at it, and then I really actually enjoyed the process.
Yeah.
But I come from a background in TV writing, and so I was in sort of a professional lull out here, and I was, just sort of like, putting the net out wide, and I saw an application for a narrative designer at Wizards of the Coast, and I was like, oh, I'll just apply for that. I don't think nobody's going to even interview me. I don't have anything on my my resume that would be relevant even. And I mean, I got an interview. It seemed very weird. And at the same time, I was contacted by the incoming showrunner of Star Trek Discovery for season 3 to apply as a writer's assistant. And so I just sent my resume off into Ether for that, and was like, okay, nobody just emails people out of the blue. It'll probably go to someone they know. Yeah. So I interviewed with Wizards. It seemed to go well, but also didn't really have any relevant experience. And so the Monday that I got the rejection from Wizards, I asked them, I sent the recruiter an email that was like, what should I do if I'm, kind of interested in pursuing this? And they're like, oh, look at the DMsGuild, maybe try self-publishing some adventures and stuff like that. And I was like, okay. And then that Friday, I got the call that I would be starting on Star Trek as a writer's assistant in a couple weeks. And so that sort of became the path. Again, I was like, all right, well, I don't need to pivot, I guess.
Yes, that sounds like a whirlwind of a week.
yeah, it was wild. But during that time, I was still very active playing with my home group, and really kind of digging into a lot of the stuff that was happening on the DMsGuild at the time. And I watched as the Uncaged anthology blew up, and I thought that was it was just so amazing. And I bought the first adventure or the first collection hardback. I really loved it. And then a call got put out, or I ended up running Alicia Furness's adventure from that. I can't remember the name of it, but it was this sort of eco-feminist adventure about merfolk and the sort of misogynistic town that's ruining the environment around it. It's a really cool adventure, but I contacted her about it and asked her some questions. And then when her and Kat Evans put out a call for Eat the Rich, I was like, oh, I'll try this. I'll shoot in a pitch. I doubt, anything will come of it. And I got into the first collection of Eat the Rich. There was supposed to be 4, but something happens.
Yeah.
The rich.
Complications arose.
Yeah. I mean, not to really get into it, but I'll say this: if I hadn't been in the first collection and been lucky enough to get my adventure published that like February, I can't remember the February after we had started, because I think we started in November, I probably would have just like been done, because like it was pretty shocking how it all came about. And but it was also super exciting to be kind of like, oh, the first book I'm a part of is a banned book.
Yeah, and thankfully it has made the kind of jump over to drive through.
Oh yes, yeah. The rest of the collection has, and I mean super huge credit to Alicia and Kat for really shepherding that all the way through a multi-year process when it should not have been nearly as hard as it needed to be. I mean, they're amazing. It's inspiring, really. But so that was the first one I did, and it was an adventure about. It was set in Ravnica. I had just gotten the source book. I was super excited about that world and kind of the structure things and sort of the intrigue between the different guilds. And so, I think that maybe this is. I think it's sort of about the strength and weakness of it, because I think when you write an adventure in a collection like that is so specific to a tied to a one of the locations in the multiverse. Yeah, it just slims the sort of audience for who might be interested in running it. But I thought it was a really fun and interesting adventure about a fallen celestial who is running a debtor's prison, and she's managed to get the laws changed so that debt has become illegal, so she can jail people for debt. And it starts this endless cycle. Yeah. And so you're off investigating all these different things. And I believe Kat was the one that said it. I think she edited the adventure that it was it had the best bureaucracy simulator she's ever read. Because you have to go through and fill out basically like Freedom of Information Acts to find like some of these records and stuff.
Because I must admit, so what I do know about at least the Ravnica kind of setting is that kind of screams Orzhov. Like was it?
Well, it starts with Orzhov. They're the ones who give you the quest.
Because again,
it is, but because it's about money and it's about debt, and they're like, who is this person running a debtor's prison? That should be us.
Yeah.
And so you start off working for shady people, but you end up going to like the Azorius Hall of Records, and it's just this. I mean, it's endless stacks of forms that you have to fill out just to get like, oh, this is an address. So it's a fun little. I think it's a fun little, little passage through a few different guilds, and like it ends with a real sort of, choice of like who you really want to give the information about this place to, and what all the different guilds that are sort of involved with it will do with it. And kind of like none of the outcomes are that great.
No. And I must say, I think that's what's kind of was particularly kind of amazing about the Eat the Rich anthology is the fact that the tyrant that is capitalism can kind of be broken down in so many different ways, and it's interesting that again, even basing it within a Magic the Gathering setting, but then bringing in a good amount of realism, it's just like an all around kind of awesome kind of concept.
Well, and I think, people expect to be out there, hack and slashing dungeon crawl, or even role playing, but they're sort of not expecting to do paperwork and the boring shit that they have to do in real life. And it's sort of delightful in that sort of ironic sense. Why am I doing this? It's absurd, but it's fun.
It was a lot easier when we would just kick down doors or so I do have if you don't mind me asking, I'm curious about how you kind of found the transition from writing for TV and film for tabletop RPGs, because obviously the kind of the shift of going towards again, I guess characters who have no impact, the story is as straight as can be, versus ones in which one player can just choose to just take the story where they want to.
Absolutely. No, I think that it's they really fill two different sort of creative itches that I have. I come from the theater background in theater and playwriting originally, and so I really like my stuff when it comes to TV writing very grounded in character, even if I am mostly like a genre writer. I mean, I do sci-fi, I do horror, and so, you know, but oftentimes with that, like, and especially like working in a franchise like Star Trek, which is amazing, like it's incredible to get to like play in that sandbox every day, but like oftentimes our world needs to sort of service the characters and the story, and sometimes we, you know, like I really want to like dig in, and you know, like I love like lore, like I grew up loving, you know, just the D&D books and like reading the lore as much as I was playing it, and like the history of things and stuff like that in the novels. So like when I get to do narrative design, it's sort of that like pure distilled world building for me. Like because like design, everything is sort of built with intent. Like even like where a door placement is like says something about the world and the person who built that structure. And so, you know, it gives me that sort of like creative satisfaction of getting to like really dig into the nitty gritty of a world without having to worry about what the characters are doing and what part they're going to actually be looking at, you know? So, you know, I think that for me, especially if I'm not running the stuff that I'm writing, it's great because, you know, when I like prep for my home games, you know, like with anybody, we see a tenth of what we prep sometimes, you know, for our players. So, you know, I think it's just like, it's really just getting to get all that out of my system and just, you know, build worlds, build stories where, you know, there are almost always just very hard choices. I like a good hard choice, and muddy answers. And that may not be for everyone's taste. I think you know, a lot of the sort of power fantasy of D&D especially, but TTRPGs in general, is, you know, getting to kind of succeed and be the heroes and all that. But I like things a little messier than that. Like you know, for me, it's there aren't clean answers ever, especially if you're an adventurer going in and, you know, kicking down a door and making decisions for other people generally. So.
Yeah, I think like it's a case of like you always have like there's obviously no wrong way to go about playing, but there always is the kind of like romanticized like idea of like, oh yeah, no, we are the good guys. We're always we're here to do. And there's one mission where you're just like, was that an orphanage we just burned down? Was that?
Are we the baddies?
Are we the baddies? Yeah, you know, your barbarians there wearing 3 different skulls that they've collected from people. They're just like, I just really like skulls. So then I'm curious then, so is that like, would you say that's kind of like almost like a cornerstone of your approach to adventure designing then, is kind of leaning towards that kind of difficult choice that kind of builds up through the story? Or
yeah, absolutely. I think even like my second adventure, I tried to make that even more apparent. That was the one I did for the Princess Project anthology. And it's called To Wash Away This Dirt. And you are either sort of natives of, or I've sort of engineered a thing where it's basically at the moment of your death, and I get all the characters to describe just how they died in a really gruesome way.
Nice.
They're sort of whisked away to this like celestial valley. It's like a hidden valley that was once protected by Zariel. But you know, then she fell. It was sort of tied into Avernus because I was starting to run Avernus at the time, and I was like, it was on my brain. But a hobgoblin conquistador has invaded the valley. Like he found the entrance and has been invading the valley, and there's only like one tribe left. And the princess of that tribe has left the village to essentially like try to make peace or something, but turns out she has become the consort of this warlord and seemingly betrayed her village. And so you are, instead of saving the princess, being sent to kill her. And what it's based around is a figure known as Malinche, who she was a Nahua woman in Mexico before it was colonized by the Spanish. And she was the consort of Hernan Cortez. And she was essentially a sex slave, though. And I mean, like, she was maligned for years because she was the translator that basically allowed Cortez to just dominate, go through and negotiate with people and then stomp all over them, take their money, kill them. And so for many years, I think that she was really like Malinche was sort of synonymous with traitor, and I think that's been sort of re-examined a lot as a more feminist view of that that sort of thing has taken root, and so I sort of based it around that and that sort of problem where she was essentially trying to renew Zariel's protection, but she was making a deal with an archdevil to do it.
Yeah.
And to do it, she had to sort of profane the temple at the center of this valley. And so her plan was to do it by killing this warlord.
Yeah.
And so you have to come in, you eventually unlock this information and get in there, and you sort of have to decide, like, do we kill her? Do we kill him? Like,
yeah.
And the worst of all outcomes is, the valley is once again placed under Zariel's protection, and she drags it into Avernus, and now the party's in Avernus.
Yeah.
And
I mean, so. it's always nice to kind of have those kind of like the potential with any kind of like one shot. It's that potential for like future adventures to kind of carry on, and
or an absolute like batshit cataclysm that's like that's the end. You just all drop into hell, and it's like, all right, that's the end of it.
It's funny as well because like starting the adventure with the fact that everyone dies, and then kind of potentially ending it with another kind of capstone of like, well, no, everyone's dead in their own, a different way now. But because that was the general focus of like the Princess Project was essentially kind of not necessarily villainizing princesses.
Yeah, but sort of recontextualizing the save the princess trope. And so mine was the sort of kill the princess instead of
it's
kind of take on it.
And I definitely what you see is like in terms of like talking about like complicated or muddied situations where there are so many like factors and tiers to it where it's easy to kind of almost empathize with differing people's kind of standpoint about like, well, how do we go about it? And those moments where you as a DM can kind of like almost like sit back and let the party discuss like, we should do this, and it's like, no, we shouldn't do that. It's
the absolute best.
Those are the best. Yeah. No, interesting. So then I guess kind of more generally then, so you've participated in the kind of Eat the Rich, the Princess Project, kind of getting involved in a good number of kind of like collaborations. When you're like putting your pitch together, do you have like any particular approach about like where your ideas come from, or?
It's hard to say. It again, it feels like so long ago, even though it was not when that happened. But I just
10 years ago, right?
I remember when Alicia put out it was like the call, and then it was sort of the second tier of like, it was like, hey, your pitch, all of your pitches have sort of, these pitches have been accepted. A lot of you are doing pitches about, medical issues as they relate to capitalism and stuff. Like, we have a bunch of that. So maybe like these are some other underrepresented ones. And one of the ones was like prison issues. And so I was like, oh, I had already done like one on like my idea was a debtor's prison. So I was like, all right, I'm good. I don't need to change anything. So, I don't know. I don't even really know where that idea came from. I just think it was like thinking about the world that it took place in. Like, I looked at the Orzhov. I love this weird mafia cult.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of ran from that idea of like, what sort of stories about capitalism could be told in this world, and thinking about debt. I probably had read an article about a debtor's prison or something, or was pitching it in the room for something. Anything like that. So.
I guess it's fascinating because it kind of highlights that there are like multitude of like approaches to it. Sometimes it is the case where a particular setting or kind of like world kind of invites that kind of sort, or other times it is the idea of like, I have this really cool idea, I need to find like a hole in the puzzle for it to kind of like slot in.
Exactly.
And well, I was gonna say, like, so for the Princess Project, it sounds like you kind of had a very kind of a particular kind of, I guess, princess story. I don't know if it
I think when Ashton put out that call, I had written a horror movie a while back that was sort of a retelling of the La Llorona myth, which is it's the sort of the kind of the terrible scorned woman trope sort of thing. The same thing with Medea, except instead of after killing her kids, riding away on a chariot pulled by dragons, witch cackling, La Llorona drowns her kids and then drowns herself in the river, comes back as a ghost.
I'm glad the child drowning is still consistent.
Yeah. It's kind of weird that's like a very common trope throughout stories, but I guess there's like 6 stories.
Yeah.
And so I had kind of done a sort of modern retelling of the La Llorona myth, but with elements of Malinche and Medea, and about these these sort of like the idea of the scorned woman and how that kind of repeats itself over and over and over again, and how it's sort of pretty unfair.
Yeah.
And so I think that had been on my mind, and Malinche had been on my mind, and I also wanted to do something that kind of brought in my Latinx heritage and stuff like that, and sort of colonialism and the sort of not Mexican mythology, but sort of the sort of grander ethos of that area, I
suppose sometimes it's a weird, that kind of blurring the lines between like myth and history. It's like these are things that happened, but over time the retellings have kind of added a certain mythos to it in sort of a weird kind of way. It's kind of, I guess it's always kind of fascinating, like the times in which you can definitely pull inspiration from just like your like heritage, from like different aspects of like cultures, that it can all kind of just kind of naturally kind of forms itself into like a fully fledged idea that like this would make for like this to be retold within a tabletop RPG, for players to kind of, I was about to say players get their hands involved, but that's poor phrasing.
But yeah, so those are the first kind of 2 that I did. I did the Odyssey anthology as well, which was kind of a Theros ocean thing, and it was you get swallowed by a kraken, and
nice.
everything that entails.
Is it like almost like a Pinocchio style, like?
Except grosser. It's like digging through kraken guts and the kraken stomach and going out with an intestinal luge.
I can't say intestinal luge. I don't think there's the 2 words that
remember no good choices.
Fair. No, fair. I must admit, it is weird to think that I'm sure there are countless adventurers who have been swallowed by a kraken, and the assumption is, well, that's just the end of the adventure. Whereas realistically, that's an adventure. Especially if it's one of those like really big Theros krakens that are island size and stuff like that. So it's, plenty of room to move around in there. At the very least, again, it just further cements the idea that like if I can avoid it, I don't want to be swallowed. like I don't want to be like, me as a human being, I just don't want to be eaten whole. And I've done well, 26 years into my life to not be.
I feel like it's a lot harder than it used to be, but it still happens.
It's not impossible. That's
not impossible, but it's harder. It's harder.
So also, well, I guess I kind of wanted to like as like a slight side pivot as well, because you've not only done essentially adventures within Arcadia, you dabbled with some still gold based kind of I was about to call it subclassery. I'm going to stick with it, some subclassery.
So the other thing, before we pivot off the adventures, the other thing that I have done that was like, and then I'll go to that because it is all related to the, capitalism of it all.
Yeah.
But I did the last DMs project, guild project I did was a gazetteer with Oliver Clegg, the Saragosse Gazetteer, which bless Oliver's heart. He put a call out for these things and then was like, between like 5 and 15,000 words. And when I came out of my like pandemic induced fugue state, I gave him like a 60,000 word document. And so it's like a really beefy a little gazetteer for what is ostensibly a 5-mile stretch of ocean. There's a lot in there.
No, I must admit, speaking like from like working on like a few, like I think I've done maybe like 2 gazetteers. It's so easy to like find more because you want to talk about so much. You want to talk about like you know the culture. You want to get like the food. You want to get it sounds like how did you manage that with again more a stretch of sea?
Well, there's also, like several hundred feet below the ocean where a lot of stuff takes place, because it's a terrible Ravenloft domain. So it's a place that sort of mires you in there. It takes your ship and you are stuck in this mire. Nobody can move anywhere. And so there's no civilization. There's no like towns or anything to go to. And so like wood becomes currency because there's nothing to repair your ships with. There's no land to get anything. And so it's a real like survival horror kind of setting. Really, if you end up in the water, you may end up staying in the water forever.
I definitely imagine that though, is like the fact that like you and your crew have kind of been taken into this area. That it is almost that idea of like, well, now we are our own kind of like miniature town. Yeah. In that sense, so that we have to kind of now defend ourselves from whoever else may be kind of around and other ships.
Yeah,
that right?
And so the bulk of the sort of Gazetteer is outlining, I think, 10 other ships that could or could not be in there. Like if you want to include them, and like one of them's like a ship full of frost giants that are just stuck there because if they step out onto the mire, they'll fall into the ocean. There's a ship full of Warforged from Eberron. It's like a Warforged pirate. And it's the only ship that can move because it's one of those elemental galleons. It's still really slow, but it's
Eberron wins again.
There's a submarine from Ravnica stuck underwater. So there's I pulled from like all different sources to really. So I think it's a really fun. Not fun for your players, but maybe fun for you as a DM.
Maybe fun for your players, not so fun for the characters. Maybe is
which that's probably a better way.
Yeah, it's fascinating here because I feel like you like the kind of hearing about the way you go about writing stuff at. I'm very much like I get quite attached to like particular settings, and again that's kind of the. I was about to say the allure of the DMs Guild is the fact that you have all these kind of, existing settings from Magic the Gathering, from, Eberron, and you can just kind of pick and pull it apart with the kind of domain of dread, being able to be like, this is my shopping cart. I'm going to pick and like, oh, a little bit of this, a little bit of this. It makes it like, like a, I was about to call it a crock pot. I don't know if that's a good analogy.
No, it's like a stew. It's like a nice little stew. Yeah, but the Dreadlord is a wereshark. Wereshark cleric. He's pretty nasty. So
that is an interesting like of any kind of particular like deity, or is it just like...
well, he was a cleric of Umberlee, but his whole thing is he's since lost connection to her. So all of his clerical powers come from the dark powers, but he still thinks it's her. She just doesn't talk to him anymore.
Still got like a small space in his shark heart. Awesome. So I must admit, I don't know what it is about Gazetteers. I think they are fun because they have the kind of, well, for certain adventures you kind of end up sometimes having to write like almost like an introductory town, or like essentially like a sandbox. And the Gazetteer is kind of that, like to the nth degree of like, here is everything you need to know about that this either town or this entire region. And it kind of... Yeah.
And they're great too, because like, you can pull from the, like Gazetteers often have random encounters and stuff. And it's like, oh, that's actually a cool encounter that like, I'm not in this city, but like I could put that in, my city that I'm, like there's always like fun things that you can pull that don't necessarily need to be in the, like you don't need to be running that thing to pull from it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they're fun. They're useful.
And so I guess, I think just so what was the kind of, there was a bridging point between Eat the Rich and money through Saragross into the gold subclasses, wasn't there?
Oh, I just figured that was all sort of, that all came before Arcadia. So it was just thinking about it chronologically.
I think it makes sense to have a story in order rather than thinking about
because I think they were all sort of building blocks towards writing for Arcadia, because James had read my stuff, and we had also worked together on non-D&D related projects. So we were just like, talking one day over Zoom, and I was like, oh, like, are you guys, like, I think the first issue of Arcadia had just come out, and I was like, are you guys like taking pitches? Like, what's going on for that? And he's like, well, we're kind of doing the first 3 and seeing how they do, and once that goes through, we're going to kind of take a month and evaluate what we want to do, and then go from there. And so I think like it was like a month. The first month was so successful that they're like, yeah, we're going to start taking pitches. Yeah. And now they have like 2 years worth of magazines.
Yeah,
crazy. And so that, and actually this is how it relates to the Saragossa Gazetteer. I remembered the connection now. So there was a day when I was supposed to be working on the Gazetteer. I had sort of blocked out that time. It was the pandemic, so nothing matters. There is no time. And I was like, I want to noodle around with subclasses. I've never played with subclasses, and so I was like, what's a fun thing? And during season 3 of Star Trek Discovery, I can talk about this because it's not a spoiler. We're dealing with the Trill a lot, which, if you aren't familiar with them, they're they're 2 species, one of which is a humanoid host, and the other is a like worm-like symbiote. The worm-like symbiote lives for like 500 years, and when the host dies, it can pass the symbiote on to the next host, carrying the line of memories all the way through. And so I was like, that's an interesting idea for a warlock patron.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No.
And so I sort of was just like, I'm gonna make a Trill warlock patron and just see what this looks like, And so I sort of made this little thing, and I don't know how well it works. I don't think it works that well. But then I also started just in the sort of way my brain works, spiraling on like, oh, what would other sort of species related subclasses be? And I came up with a few and just like jotted them down. But then the other one that was like the most obvious to me was a Ferengi paladin of the Oath of Acquisitions.
Yeah.
And so I sort of dreamed up this thing that was all like a mercenary paladin that was all based around getting paid, getting money, and like you could, yeah, sure, you're a hero, but like there's
a bottom line to me.
Yeah, like it's like I still got to eat. And so it was sort of like I had noodled around with that. And so when I was talking with James, I was like, well, I have these like kind of dumb Star Trek subclasses, and he's like, well, those sound cool. Let me read them. We can't do an article about Star Trek themed subclasses. I was like, no, totally understand. But just tell me what you think. And so he was like, well, the Warlock is interesting. I don't know how, like viable it is right now. I mean, we could work on it, but maybe like take another look at this Paladin and see if you can build a theme around that. And so I was like, oh, okay. Like, what about like greed-based subclasses? And that's kind of where it was born. And so the Cleric of Avarice came out of that, that one was the most obvious in terms of theme, but I think for me the hardest to conceive. And there's part of me that still thinks that it isn't quite like feeling flavor wise like an Avarice cleric unless you're spinning it in that way. But like, because it doesn't have a lot to do with like wealth generation. It's more about like greedily copying the benefits that you would bestow onto others, like basically doing nothing for others that does not benefit yourself.
Just like kind of like gimme kind of.
Yeah, because capitalism sometimes works for the benefit of people, sometimes, but only if it's also generating capital. And so that was the idea that I was sort of basing that one around. And then, the Paladin was pretty much like, I mean, there were, some small adjustments here and there, but that's almost the original conception. But the Avarice Cleric and then the Circle of the Gilded Druid were sort of, they were from scratch. And the Circle of the Gilded Druid was sort of the one that I thought, I don't know how people.
I was going to say, because like, so when we're kind of reading through it, that one definitely kind of like stood out because it feels like such a unique pairing. Like when you think about the stereotypical druid, You almost put them the opposite end of money grabbing.
Well, and it was a really hard one to conceive. Like I said, the avarice one was easy to conceive of thematically, hard mechanically to execute for me, or to figure out what that theme was. But for the druid, it took me a long while, because I had said, oh, I'll do a wealth-based druid. Like, I want to see what a money, because like druids never need money. You don't need anything.
My mom was the idea of, like hoarding squirrels.
Yeah, exactly. You have a bunch of bird seed. And so I was like, well, what would a druid that is like, why would they want wealth? And I thought, like, well, what an opportunity to sort of recontextualize, like a druid that, we always see, the villain druid is like protecting the grove that the lumber people are, trying to chop down. And so I was like, well, what if there are druids for like mines or like places of precious metals and gems, who believe that power comes from those things and should best be left in the earth. And so I conceived of druids that embedded gems and precious metals into their bodies to essentially make them more effective protectors of these sites. And I thought that they could, like, they really actually took off with the community. They seem to be the favorite of all the playtesters and the people who sort of commented on it afterwards, because it was like, people felt it was such a unique spin on a druid and how they, like what they could be.
Yeah.
And
it's kind of fascinating, because like particular subclasses, they almost do invite themselves like a huge element of like world building, just by someone of this, a druid of this kind existing in the world. What does that mean? Like, obviously it means there's probably a whole kind of like structured whole like groves in place. It almost has like a knock-on effect.
Well, and I think it would like what a cool villain, but like an economic villain that is like going around and like breaking into like the stores of kingdoms and melting down like their entire vaults, like, sending these cities spiraling into ruin, but also like all of this wealth was stolen.
I see what you mean. This is the muddying the waters again. It's not so like, you just pointed at the druid, call them evil. They're doing some, I'm impressed.
Yeah. So that's kind of my consistent sort of way that I go about things. I have another article coming up in Arcadia, I think in January, that's taking some of my favorite, I guess the easiest way to, my favorite horror movie icons, and giving them a way to sort of incorporate them into the world of your story in a way, like a dream-based serial killer, and something that's sort of based around sleep paralysis and kind of loosely the Babadook.
Yeah. Wow. So again, before getting too far away from like I guess like subclass design, again, the idea of like tools to kind of help with again, I'm very squeamish, so in terms of like I like horror as a genre, just we don't mesh. But I guess I'm kind of curious about like, so going from predominantly kind of writing kind of adventures and gazetteers, which are like almost like expanded adventures in their own way. How did you kind of find that first kind of foray in kind of fiddling with subclass design?
Yeah, subclasses they were really difficult. I mean, like just the original conception of them was difficult, but there's also a pretty simple guide in that, like, I know I need to have a power here, I know I need to have a power here, I know I need to have a power here. So you can look at like sort of comparable, like what is the sort of scale of things, and with MCDM, like you have the benefit of having like a crack group of playtesters who just, they really kick the tires on your material. And so I would say probably the Avarice Cleric and the Druid went through the most sort of mechanical changes throughout, based on what was fun, what was interesting about them, and what is sort of more current in subclass design. Than sort of what I had originally kind of conceived.
I'm curious as well. Did you have like much chance before as almost like a comparison of like playtesting and going through your adventures as you were kind of?
So I luckily have a dedicated home play group, and especially at the time pre-COVID. So it was just as easy to be like, hey, we're taking this week off. Let's 3 of you come over. I'm going to invite 3 other people, and let's run through this adventure I'm writing.
Yeah.
Give me some feedback. And then I was able to run it the next weekend with the other half of the group and another sort of people that I've been wanting to play with for a while. So for Eat the Rich and the Princess Project adventures, I did get to play test them a couple times with my home group.
Yeah.
But what I think is so valuable about MCDM's testers is they have people who are not you testing it, looking at the information objectively, because like the truth of it is, like with both of those adventures, there are certain parts of it that are in my head because I had to cut things out of word count and all those things. So I think that they really dig down and make you justify or explain things that aren't clear and stuff like that. And I think that's really to the benefit of all the material coming in Arcadia every month.
I think another thing is like, so when it comes to like playtesting, at least in the context of adventures, doing the first playtest yourself allows you to kind of, I guess, pick up the most kind of almost like egregious errors that you kind of go through. And you as you kind of running through it, you're identifying gaps that like, okay, right now I'm making it up on the fly because again, this is my adventure I can fill out. Then I go away and I can kind of write up, like a formal kind of chunk. But being able to, again, have that next step of like, I can pass this off to someone else and touch wood, they can run it without dilemma.
Well, it's also I think a lot harder to like playtest your own subclasses in a lot of ways. Like adventures, like there are people I want to play with, there are people who want to play with me, but we're adults and none of us have time, and we're all so but if I'm like actually trying to put something together, it wouldn't be that hard to gather 4 or 5 people to one weekend to come and play something. But like there's a lot more nuance to a subclass because you sort of have to test it at multiple levels. You have to test it, at each sort of tier of ability and stuff like that. So
it's all things considering about like how it meshes with certain character like other like combos and stuff like that. It's interesting because like I guess adventure design is like you want it to be all purpose that any class can kind of come to the table and kind of play it. Whereas subclass and stuff like that, it's always a case of like, each subclass always is going to fit into a niche. Like if you're designing a class to be like, I don't know, a healer, a damage dealer, or whatever kind of thing it kind of falls into. They have to play nice with others. They can't outshine. They can't be like consistently doing 300 damage or consistently doing 2. There's again, this is the part where we take our hats off to playtesters.
I mean all of them were really, and it was also like the first time like because the playtesters reached out to me and were like, this was awesome, we really love this. And like it was the first time someone had actually like ran through my material that like didn't know me personally and like reached out and was like, we loved your things, like, and so like that feels really good as a designer, like because it doesn't happen that often. Like truthfully, I think like Alicia said that I was the first person that reached out to her about her adventure in Uncaged, and so reach out to the writers that you like. It means a lot to us when you do.
No, this is the call to action for this episode. Is like,
don't say mean things though. Like
nobody gets that. Pause the video right now. Go find a creator whose content you've enjoyed, and let them know the lovely, kind words. They'll appreciate them. So then I guess to pull back and again, now that we like obviously I feel bad because we haven't had the chance to like speak about like iHunt.
Briefly, I did a zine in iHunt. It's like it takes place in the 80s, and it's the bit I did is not so much game design, but it's just a lot of like lore and world building. And iHunt is a very cool system that uses fate. It's Buffy meets Uber, and you should definitely check it out. But I basically did a lost cartoon show. Within there. So there's a couple pages of the script. My friend who's a storyboard artist, like he's been at Nickelodeon and DreamWorks and stuff like that, did some art for us, and like the poster of the TV show. It's really cool shit, and definitely check it out.
No, awesome. I guess it's kind of fascinating to hear about like all these different like aspects of things you do, kind of coming in and feeding back into like your RPG products.
Well, so iHunt in particular, and I've talked about this on Twitter publicly, so this is no secret. iHunt is very close to my heart because a friend of mine, Anne Cofell Saunders, who I worked with on Star Trek Discovery, she and I optioned iHunt to adapt it for a television show. And we started pitching it out, and like people were responding really well to it, but it was right at that period in COVID when everyone was like, well, we love your idea, but we don't know what anything is anymore.
Yeah.
So we're not going to buy anything. And so, it was, I think, some just poor timing, not on our part, because how could we predict, but,
no, of course.
But yeah, so that's actually something that I'm trying more and more is I really want to pull tabletop RPG products into my realm out here, because I think there are so many great stories. And for me, as a storyteller who loves the character work as much as the world building, what I get in some of these properties and worlds are just these incredibly rich, diverse sandboxes for me to play in and create the story that I want to tell in it. With the characters doing exactly what I want them to do, not diverging, not talking to the old lady in the corner of the tavern that I haven't named. So, it sort of fills kind of in that way, kind of both sides of that itch. So I have 3 projects right now that are sort of in varying stages of development and taking out into the world, and we'll see where they land. And so
no, it's
hopefully...
I basically I can only really agree. It's like the kind of the pulling things across, and sometimes it is a case of like some people just want kind of support to play in the worlds that they love. And as like a TV show or anything, as it develops, the worlds they get more complex, and it's a case of like some people just want to be able to kind of have almost some agency or some input, and to be able to tell their own kind of stories. But then I guess so to pull back and kind of look over kind of everything as a whole. Then when you are like writing from start to finish, what would you say are like the favorite and like least favorite parts of like the process?
Oh, starting it is the best. I mean, like once you got past that first like blank page fear, just the blinking cursor, and you get some words on the page and you're like, oh, it's just infinite potential from there. That's for me like the best part, when you're in the first like few hundred words, you're not even thinking about word count, which I know goes to your next question. And you're just, it's sort of unfettered, you get to kind of just go nuts. And so that's the part of it I really enjoy. I also, I love character building, even within the limited kind of scope that you get to do in adventure design, because there's so little, but I just, I like giving someone really interesting bones to build off of, because
but just the idea of just interesting bones.
Here's some bones. But no, because that's all an adventure is, and it's the same thing with a screenplay. It's not a finished product. It is a product for someone to take and reinterpret, because no one is going to run an adventure the same way. Two different people are going to take the same adventure, and you're going to have completely different outcomes. That happened actually. So I ran Anthony Rapp is very publicly, in the D&D space now, and one of my coworkers. But I ended up running the first adventure in Arcadia for him and a couple of the Star Trek cast members and a couple other folks over Zoom. And it was the Workshop Watches, which is this cool, it's by Leon Barriello, and it's this really cool, like sort of magical intelligence has taken over a workshop and killed the wizards in it, and you have to sort of figure out what happened. And it's like, you're basically interacting with a potentially evil computer. And I love that shit. And so Anthony ended up running that for Broadway Con. And so I watched it, and I've run that adventure now 4 times, and it's never ended up exactly the same. And Anthony, it was very different how he ran it. And so like, I love seeing that. I love that like, and it's the same thing with screenplays. Like, you will, like, a screenplay is something that you give a director, and then that director is going to interpret your words and figure out what their vision of it is. And then that director is going to give it to an editor, and that editor is going to be like, all right, well, we have to cut it this way. And, this sequence was way too slow. So we're, and so, the way that I'm sort of geared towards telling stories is this sounds weird, but giving you something that's essentially an incomplete product.
But then it's to add your own kind of unique table element and to be able to have those kind of stories. So then I guess to kind of add on to that a little bit, then it was like talking about giving characters, some interesting bones. What would you say is like, do you have like any kind of like, do you always lean towards like a particular kind of like a defining personality trait? Is it more kind of sometimes like kind of like mannerisms, or is it just sometimes just the situation that this character kind of finds themselves in?
No, I mean, I think it's, I don't think I necessarily, I think for me, just as, a queer Latinx person, I generally try to write my characters as diverse as possible within the worlds of my my things, and that includes people who are minorities maybe not being model citizens either. I feel like we can occupy all the same spaces that straight cis people do, and so I think that that's a common thing. I definitely try to inject that into all of my work across all mediums, and I feel like I lost the thread of the question there. But...
No, but it's always interesting of like, again, that idea of regardless of like what you kind of place the character in, just giving the GM who's running the game, I guess, just enough bones to kind of run with and to flesh out however the story kind of fits, whether they need the robot to be the kind of monotone murderous villain, or if they could be somewhat lovable and clumsy, or kind of have that flexibility. And then again, so to carry on the tangent of the previous question of like, okay, so if your favorite part is then getting into that kind of flow, what's the other side of the coin? What's your least favorite part?
Word count. Word count every time. I mean, it's like and I recognize the necessity, and especially for the mental health of editors everywhere. I recognize it, but I'm just like, man, I just think about all the things I've had to leave on the cutting room floor. Like even from, Eat the Rich, I still remember things that I was like, man, I did this cool thing, but I had to just cut out that encounter entirely because it just wouldn't fit. So that's kind of the thing is once things start going to the chopping block, and that's actually been the most satisfying part of working with Arcadia is they're always just like more words. And we're like, okay.
There is always something of a silver lining to like when things do find the like chopping block, because there is always like the graveyard, which at any point you can go kind of rifling in and raising things from the dead and repurposing and kind of things. But sometimes it is that case of like, it would be so good here. Like this is the perfect arm that I could just sew on here, but it already has two arms. A third might be a bit much. I don't know. I'm quite proud of that analogy with no, interesting. So then I guess keeping along the kind of same trend of everything you've done and kind of looking about your process as a whole, what would you say it has been like a piece of design work that you've done that you're like particularly proud of?
I'm really proud of the thing that's one in particular of the two monsters that's coming up in Arcadia, because it a lot of the not to spoiler things, but a lot of monsters like Krakens, for example, that have like multiple appendages that you can cut off, it doesn't really have any like mechanical sort of benefit to doing it, other than it's like you do some hit point damage. And I created a mechanic for this monster that really feels like when you're doing like cutting the appendages, there is a steep drop to its combat abilities, but the thing is those appendages they could come back and stuff. So it's a sort of a cost benefit analysis of like how much do we want to reduce this monster's effectiveness versus how much just straight damage do we want to do to it to try and kill it. And James and the testers thought that was a really cool way to go about that. And so that was like when I was like, oh, I'm actually pretty proud of that, because I haven't done a lot of monster design.
Yeah. I think I said this before, but what's the benefit of like particularly starting from like an adventure standpoint is you do kind of have leeway to do a little bit of everything. Like even then you kind of occasionally like, oh, I need a monster, but nothing quite matches. I'll just design a monster. And that way bit by bit you kind of develop those skills, and then kind of going out to be like, I'm just gonna create this. I don't want to assume, but I assume, I don't know if they have the normal number of appendages or if they have an abnormal number of appendages need cutting off. But
it all depends on your perspective of what normal is.
Yeah, I must admit, I think it's a case of like if you're dealing with like a very traditional like horror villain, I think any number of appendages is probably too many if they're standing
Yeah,
opposite
that's
you.
fair. Yeah.
No, awesome. And then I guess the kind of like the last thing, the kind of the bow and to tie things all together then. Across your journey, what is like one particular lesson that maybe you wish you'd learned sooner?
Oh man, read those style guides and then reread them. Like they save you time, they save your editor time. Like, you know, it's like, at least for me, it just feels sort of like when you go through, even though there's no shame like from the editing side of things of it, but like you're going through the manuscript and you're seeing all the corrections and you're like,
yeah,
why? Why did I like it's unnecessary because it is literally, if you like read style guides of whatever place that you're working for, those answers are in there. Those things, those formatting things are pretty easy, and it's not hard to commit that stuff to memory, or at least take a pass on it. So read your style guides.
And sometimes it is that case of like once you kind of have an editor, once you have like the editor kind of go through and fix things to make you're always like, okay, I'm now on my to-do list of final checks. I now have this check to make the next editor's life that much easier. And it kind of bit by bit it gets, it may never be perfect, but again, that's why we have editors and that's why we love them so much. Fantastic. Well, and then I guess, because kind of speaking about getting other editors and other people involved, and from like playtesters and everything, the community as like a whole, again, it sounds like you've kind of been bouncing around from collaboration to collaboration, getting involved in all kind of manner of projects. Who would you say are like some of the sources of inspiration like within the tabletop RPG industry?
Oh, I think, I mean, if I'm narrowing it down to just one,
I know it's a bit of a tough one.
it's tough, but I really think Orion D. Black is Orion's. I mean, I don't know how many people know them. Orion is the creative director of Dimension 20, which is Fantasy High, The Seven, all of those. I mean, really amazing real plays, and I really think they're pushing the boundaries at the potential of that medium. I mean, whereas I think, Critical Role is certainly sort of the very workhorse, high, slick production value thing, but they're doing a very traditional real play.
Yeah,
I really think the way that Creative 20 and Orion is sort of pulling in talent from all these different spheres, just a really diverse group of people, it's really inspiring. Yeah. And I mean, to boot, they're an incredible designer. Strangely enough, Orion was the one who got the job that I applied for at Wizards.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it was a, strange little small. Well, I guess this world is very small.
No, it's smaller than we think.
Yeah, but no, I think that the work they're doing both on the design half and the sort of creative community building and sort of the space that they're creating with Dimension 20 is just it's awe-inspiring. I think it's amazing.
No, I think again I can only kind of echo and kind of agree, because I think what's kind of fascinating is that there are so many different factors that kind of go into, I guess, any aspect of design, depending on like what context it's going to appear. Like I can't imagine from the ground up designing for like an action play or any manner of kind of like, because there's so much more than just like it's not quite a traditional adventure, because it has to have, I don't know, almost like the kind of situation to allow the characters on the table to kind of shine, and kind of draw it. It's, I don't know, I don't know how I would go about it. I imagine like you sound like I think you've definitely got kind of a more screen facing skill set to kind of tackle something along that side of things.
Maybe someday. So, I go on hiatus every so often, and then I definitely that's when I was doing a lot of work. So maybe we'll see.
No, I like that. It's a very kind of like diplomatic, very sort of like if there's any kind of like people who need action play designers, maybe hit me up. Who knows?
Yeah. But no, that's Orion is just incredible.
Yeah. No, fantastic. Well, speaking of incredible people, Carlos, thank you so much for this. We've done it. We've managed to survive an hour. Not that there was any chance of us not surviving, but you never know. But as kind of always, before kind of leaving or closing or anything like that, I would love to kind of hear about some of the stuff that you can talk about that you're currently working on. So I have some work coming up in Star Trek Adventures that'll come out sometime next year.
My episode of Star Trek Discovery will air on December 30th.
Oh wow!
It's episode 7 of season 4. And obviously the Arcadia article that's coming out. And yeah, those are kind of the main things. I'm going to be also on the Kill Every Monster podcast sometime. I'm recording in December, but I think January. So that'll be another place that I will be found.
Yeah. Well, I guess as a follow-up question then, how can people stay up to date with all these things you got going on? It sounds amazing.
I mean, I'm on Twitter, so it's at Carlos_Cisco, and that's pretty much where I'm at. Where I am. I should probably set up a website that has links to all my different work, but
that's
it's
somewhat.
That's a thing for someone who's more organized.
Yeah, I think there's always that thing though of like, I particularly notice like once I'm particularly busy working, it's harder to kind of maintain the stuff that might help you get more work, because it's like now I'm up to here to deadlines. I don't have time to maybe look for another deadline to kind of cap things off.
Yeah. But yeah, or the DMsGuild, the iHunt stuff is on Drive-Through and then Arcadia.
Yeah, I mean, so like I said, I think there'll be links to all 3 somewhere in the description. So just go have a look. But no, honestly, I thank you so much. This has been a delight, kind of from start to finish. It
was really fun.
No, well, well, I guess otherwise, I've been Matthew Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes. I don't think I have anything coming out right now, but maybe if I do, there'll be like I'll do like an insert. That's that's how dramatic we're getting. So other than that, just be sure to look after yourselves. And I get to ask my favorite question, which is the final question, which is how do you end a podcast, Carlos?
You're a monster, Matthew.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. Oh God.
No, I'm sticking with it. At this point, we've already faded out.
Yeah, good. Cut it there.